You have made an excellent choice by choosing to click on this video. This video is long, but it is epic, and it is one of the most amazing videos you will ever watch, filled with so much amazing information. It is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, and there will be a mass evacuation of Manhattan Island on April 13th, 2023. The post date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. In this video, I will talk about the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979, America's worst nuclear meltdown, and how the release of radioactive nuclear material and the evacuation of the 3 Mile Island area is a prophecy that is directly pointing to the dirty nuclear material bomb that will explode on Manhattan Island in New York City, which will release radioactive nuclear waste and cause a mass evacuation of Manhattan Island on April 13th, 2023. And I will also talk about how the explosion at the chocolate factory in Pennsylvania and this prophetic sign on the same day that the barge filled with 14,000 gallons of highly explosive methanol gas that slammed into the dam in Louisville, Kentucky, threatening to contaminate the Ohio River on the same day that in Louisville, Kentucky, the capital of Kentucky, it became law that Kentucky be a Second Amendment gun rights sanctuary from any future attempt from the federal government to take away people's right to own guns. And this was also the same day that the staffer for the senator from Kentucky was stabbed in an attack in the nation's capital. I will explain why these Kentucky signs, in conjunction with this sign of the chocolate factory explosion, was exactly 44 years after the 3 Mile accident began at 4 a.m., and why these Kentucky signs are 4 times 4 days exactly to the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode on Manhattan Island. And in this video, I will explain how when the 44th president on March 25th, 2014, said that his biggest worry was a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan, was a prophecy that is directly pointing and predicting the date it is predicted this dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. In this video, I will also talk about things such as how ancient Roman history was designed by God as a prophecy to be a parallel with the events that are unfolding in the end times, and Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation. And you will not hear this information anywhere else. And you absolutely must hear this information. And some of the specifics I will talk about: the assassination of Julius Caesar and the rise of Caesar Augustus and the Civil War, the final war of the Roman Republic between Augustus Caesar and Mark Antony, and the dictatorial powers that Augustus was given over the food supply, which is symbolism for the dictatorial powers that the Antichrist will be given over the food supply very soon. The Antichrist that was born in August. And I will be talking about, for example, the 1986 Masters golf tournament, which was won by Jack Nicklaus in Augusta, Georgia, which hints at Augustus. And I will talk about the 2012 Olympics in London, and the London blackout 7 years later exactly. I will talk about the false missile alert in Hawaii in 2018. I will talk about the recent KGB building explosion on the border of Ukraine. And I will talk about the car bombing outside of Moscow in August last year that killed the daughter of the famous Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin, and the bomb explosion downtown Nashville on Christmas Day in 2020. And I will talk about a number of other amazingly interesting things, and I will tie them all together. And what I'm going to do in this video is present for you a big picture and how they'll all connect to become something of a story that is cohesive and relates to this subject of this prediction for the dirty bomb in Manhattan on April 13th. In order to do this, please allow me to be your teacher a professor, if you will, for the next hour or so, while I present this case and slowly build upon it to make the case of what is going on here. Let's begin first with establishing the significance of March 16th, 2023. We need to establish this date first, and I will explain more later, but let's talk about first what happened on March 16th. That's where we will begin this story. And we'll do this in order to establish the date. Now, prior to March 16th, 2023, I predicted in advance that there would be a prophetic explosion sign on this date, and that it would relate to the prediction for the dirty bomb in Manhattan. And that's exactly what ended up happening. It's amazing. And this isn't the only time that such a thing has happened. It's happened over 100 times on this video channel, where a sign has been predicted in advance. Now, on March 16th, what happened was this major story regarding an explosion in the building operated by the FSB, which formerly is the KGB in Russia, at the border or near the border of Ukraine. And the story involves how Ukraine denies any involvement. I'm personally skeptical that this explosion was an accident, but either way, it still contains secret agency activity symbolism, and Ukraine is still a part of this story, with Kiev, the government in Kiev, officially denying any involvement. And this is exactly what is predicted to occur on April 13th, 2023, with this dirty bomb explosion. It will be speculated by some that Ukraine will be involved, or was involved, and Ukraine or Kiev will officially deny any involvement. All right, now on this same day, the rescue effort was officially called off in Colombia after an explosion in a coal mine, making it officially 21 souls that perished. God has frequently used in his big picture of signs the name Colombia to symbolize America. 21 is 3 sets of 7, and God frequently uses 3 sets of 7 in his big picture of prophetic signs, which, by the way, his true big picture of signs is only being explained on this channel. And he does this to symbolize judgment, because in the book of Joshua, Joshua led the Hebrews around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment. And they marched 7 times, once per day for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. It was a symbolic 3 sets of 7. In the Noah's flood judgment account, there are 3 sets of 3 sets of 7. All right. Now, this explosion at the KGB building on the border of Ukraine, with the Kiev government denying it had any involvement, it occurred 208 days, and I'll explain why that's relevant in a minute, after another explosion sign on August 20th, 2022. And likewise, prior to that date, it was predicted that there would be a prophetic explosion that would ultimately be related to the prediction of the dirty bomb in Manhattan. And again, that's exactly what happened. And by the way, not once has there ever been such a prediction to be wrong, and there's been over 100 instances in which this was correct, documented in videos on this channel. And not once was it wrong. So anyway, that was another explosion, and it was also in Russia. And that was the car bomb explosion, which was the #1 news story, top news story anyway, #1 on the Drudge Report, but top news story of the day. This explosion just outside of Moscow, a car explosion, car bomb, and it killed the daughter of Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin is dubbed to be the brain of Vladimir Putin, the philosophical mind behind the Putin movement, if you will. Of course, that's just hype and nonsense from the Western mainstream media. But nonetheless, there is this symbolism with Alexander Dugin and his importance, and that's adding to the prophetic significance of this prophetic sign. And it's speculated, of course, that there was Ukrainian involvement with this car bomb explosion. But again, just like on March 16th, the Kiev government officially denied any involvement. And that may well be the case. But the thing is that the Ukraine government doesn't have control over its country. There are many factious, different militia groups that are Nazis, full-on, 100% Nazis. And that's not Putin propaganda. If you think that that is Putin propaganda and saying such a thing as being a Putin stooge, my friend, you are completely brainwashed. And you have no idea what is going on in Ukraine, which is the case for most people. They are busy with their lives. They don't really care, and they accept what they get fed through the lying, wicked legacy media, which these days is completely corrupted and is a mouthpiece for the State Department, which is also completely corrupt. And so, anyway, there are Nazi militias that are receiving the weapons and money coming from the West, fighting the war. And it's not inconceivable at all. In fact, it's obvious that that's what would have been behind the car bomb in Moscow, and could have been behind the explosion at the KGB building. Who knows about that? But definitely the car bomb. I mean, and I think there was even a story where the Russians caught them trying to cross the border into Estonia. I could be wrong about that, though. It's been a while. But anyway, the point is that these two prophetic explosion signs, which are related to the dirty bomb explosion, because this is exactly what will happen with the dirty bomb. It will be, who was behind it? It will be the question. And the reason why God is providing these signs is to communicate that it will be Ukraine or elements within Ukraine that will be behind the dirty bomb explosion. If we think about it, that could very well be, there could very well be a simple motive behind that too. You know, they're going to lose this war. There's zero doubt about that. 100%, Ukraine will eventually lose this war. It could be that they're really losing right now. And, out of desperation, they could do something like that to drum up more support, with the hope of bringing in, U.S. foot soldier, soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, etc. Right? So, but anyway, that's a whole other subject. We don't want to talk about too much more about that, but it's relevant here because the date 3/16 is also hinting at this. Anyway, we'll get into that as we go here. So the point is as I was saying, these two explosion signs were 208 days apart. And from the explosion at the KGB building at the border of Ukraine, which Ukraine denied having any involvement in, from that explosion on March 16th, it is 28 days to the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, which will have Ukraine involvement. Okay, so again, from the explosion, the car bomb explosion in Moscow, it is 208 days to March 16th, which is in turn 28, which 208 days hints at 28. And that, and March 16th is in turn 28 days to the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. And so that's the reason for going into this, to start with this. We have now established this date, March 16th. Let's just talk about some more things that were known before March 16th that were from God, connections that God was using to point to March 16th, and then we'll get into some other more amazing things. Okay, I'm just going to read from this email that I wrote prior to March 16th in order to document this prediction for March 16th. As you can see, this email was sent on January 6th. Okay, so this is this email that I wrote before March 16th predicting this explosion sign. In Strong's Hebrew Bible Concordance, H188 is the word meaning woe, exclamation mark. God uses this number because of this. It's in context of extreme judgment from God in the Bible, this word woe, exclamation mark, as I just said right here. Okay, and so March 16th will be 1,888 days after the false missile alert in Hawaii on January 13th, 2018. That was the day that the people on the island of Oahu feared this missile, and it took, I think it was over a half an hour before the missile alert was called off. People were scrambling, fearing for their lives for over a half hour. Anyway, it's 1,888 days, which hints at 188, and I'll prove more. I'll give you another second witness to confirm this later in this video. In the Bible, a 7-year period is symbolism for the period of the Antichrist, and it is only symbolism. We are already well inside the 7 years, which began in 2017. And also lightning is symbolism for the Antichrist, and also a goat is symbolism for the Antichrist. In pop culture, goat, greatest of all time, is symbolism for in God's signs, a goat is symbolism for the Antichrist. At the London Olympics in 2012, on August 9th, 2012, Usain Lightning Bolt, that's his name, Usain Lightning Bolt. I believe Lightning is a nickname, but I could be wrong about that, but I think he also named one of his kids Thunder. But anyway, Usain Lightning Bolt became the first man to win both the 100 and 200 meter races in consecutive Olympics, making him a GOAT, greatest of all time, Antichrist symbolism. And his name is Lightning. And he conceitedly gestured for people to shut up and said, quote, I am a legend, unquote. This is complete Antichrist behavior. Okay? In the Bible, Methuselah was 969 years old at the time of the flood judgment. At the Olympics, Usain Lightning Bolt ran the 100 meters in 9.69 seconds. Okay? Lightning is symbolism for electricity. On August 19th, 2019, exactly 7 years later, which is again symbolism for the Antichrist, exactly 7 years after Lightning Bolt became the first man to win the 100 and 200 meters in consecutive Olympics, by cheating, by the way, which is Antichrist as well. We all know that, he takes performance-enhancing illegal drugs, of course. And you should know by now that Barack Obama cheated with his fake birth certificate and lying about him being born in the US. And of course, he will become president again through the president that became president through the shenanigans that occurred in 2020. An unexpected and unusual massive power outage occurred in London due to 2 large generators in different parts of the country cutting out. In other words, it was a coincidence, complete coincidence. The 2 large generators in different parts of the country cut out, causing the London blackout exactly 7 years after the Lightning Usain Bolt became the GOAT, okay, in London. Not only that, though, but these 2 large generators for the nation of the UK that were 100 miles apart from each other, the national grid said that the cause of the outage were lightning strikes. So it was lightning strikes that caused the blackout exactly 7 years after Usain Lightning Bolt became the GOAT in London at the London Olympics. On this same day, on August 9th, 2019, a historic cross was restored or returned from the US to a church in Nagasaki, Japan. It had been given to a US soldier to take home after the atomic bomb was dropped. Nagasaki is the location of the Hidden Christians World Heritage Sites. The letters of the Greek alphabet are also numbers, just like Roman letters are also numbers, likewise Greek letters. The Greek letters for the name Jesus add up to 888. The London blackout and the cross in Nagasaki on August 9th, 2019, which, by the way, was the anniversary of the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, was exactly 888 months after the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Right? So exactly 888 months, Jesus means equates to 888. And Nagasaki is known for the hidden Christian World Heritage Sites, the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, named Hidden Christian or Hidden Christians, because they were persecuted, which is Antichrist symbolism. The Christians that were converted by the Portuguese in Nagasaki were later, throughout the centuries, persecuted by other Japanese. So they went into hiding. And likewise, Christians will hide from the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist in the end times. Okay, so August 9th, 2019 is also exactly 188 weeks, which is again the word woe, right? Hints at that, before the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, in New York City. Okay, so this London blackout, right? The day of this cross and the hidden Christian symbolism, which was 7 years after the goat and all that. This day is exactly 188 weeks, which is a massive connection, because what are we talking about? A big woe. When the dirty bomb will explode, it'll be a big woe. And so that's why it connects with this extremely prophetic date here to the dirty bomb explosion in New York City. But there's more. New York City was known as New Amsterdam. Before it was named New York City, it was named New Amsterdam. Also, during the day of August 9th, 2019, a very rare tornado ravaged downtown Amsterdam. Big news story. It was a news story in the US, in fact. It was such a rare thing. Downtown Amsterdam, which is in Europe, on the same day as the London blackout, just across the channel in Europe. So that's astounding. So in other words, the London blackout is through the tornado in Amsterdam is pointing to the dirty bomb explosion, the big woe that's upcoming in Manhattan and New York City exactly 188 weeks later. Okay? That's pretty straightforward. I think you probably understood that. March 16th will be... Oh, by the way, though, this 188 weeks connects to March 16th. Okay, sorry. That's why we needed to establish March 16th, which, as I explained, is 28 days to the dirty bomb explosion. Okay, we already established how that's relevant, the 28 days. Now I'll explain something else. March 16th also connects with 4 plus 4 plus 4 days to March 28th, which in turn connects with 4 times 4 days to April 13th. I'll repeat that. March 16th connects with 4 plus 4 plus 4 days to March 28th and the prophetic sign, which was predicted in advance, another explosion sign, which did occur. And then in turn, March 28th is 4 times 4 days to the predicted dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. Okay, the reason for that is because it's all pointing to the Antichrist, the 44th president. That's the reason for all of this Antichrist symbolism here, with Usain lightning bolt, the 7 years connection, the hidden Christians. Okay, this is all Antichrist, and that's why God connected all of this to March 16th first as a step in the trail that's leading to the date it is predicted that the explosion will occur in New York City. 4 plus 4 plus 4 days, and then 4 times 4 days later, hinting at the 44th president, Antichrist, the GOAT Antichrist. Okay, March 16th this was written beforehand, exactly 119 months after the West Texas fertilizer plant explosion and the Boston bombing on Patriots' Day. Okay, and those were prophetic signs explained in other videos that are also pointing in other trails of signs to the prediction for the explosion in Manhattan. 119 hints at the judgment warning from God that were the events on 9/11. The Boston bombing was in turn exactly 1,091 days after the explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that was offshore from the Gulf Coast states. But so 1,191 hints at 9/11. This isn't the only example where God has used this number by far, not the only example, to hint at 9/11, including, for example, exactly 191 months after 9/11 to the day that Washington's wall collapsed in Washington's Mount Vernon estate, which is explained in other videos. And likewise, the Boston bombing and the West Texas fertilizer explosion and the Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion are explained in other videos and how they connect to the dirty bomb explosion predicted for April 13th in Manhattan. The Deepwater Horizon explosion killed 11 people and 17 were injured. On 9/11, the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state in New York City, which is made up of 11 letters, were struck 17 minutes apart. Okay? So that's why this is 9/11 symbolism also. Another judgment warning, because the 9/11 events were the big judgment warning, and God pointed to it again through the Deepwater Horizon explosion that killed 11 and injured 17. Also, the Antichrist is mentioned in the book of Zechariah, chapter 11, verse 17. The first mention of the word owl in the Bible occurs in Leviticus 11:17. Barack Obama is known for being a night owl, which contrasts with his predecessor, who was known for being an early bird. And the 1,117th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, for which 11 and 17 hints at, is the word Bama, which means high place. Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, and the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak is the word for lightning. The language Jesus would have spoken, is the word from, and the word Bama is the word for high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven. For example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us because there would be a famous president named Barack Obama, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, lightning from heaven. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. The Antichrist is the 44th president and was the basketball president that wore jersey number 23. On March 13th, 2023, the explosion, which was the KGB building explosion, exploded exactly 4 times 40 days, which hints at 44, which is also exactly 23 weeks, which is almost exactly 44% of a year. And God pairs numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to point to the 44th president that wore jersey number 23. And this was 4 times 40 days after the mayor of New York City declared an emergency due to illegal immigrants streaming across the southern border wall of security. Now, that date that the mayor declared this emergency in New York City was 10/7, October 7th, and God uses the date 10/7 to hint at the Day of Atonement, which in the Hebrew calendar is the 10th day of the 7th month. All right, there are many other examples in recent years where God has confirmed this, demonstrated this. And that's because the Antichrist will be defeated on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar in 2024. October 12th in 2024, at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, when he will defeat the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. And so that's why there's this 44 symbolism, because the Antichrist that will be defeated on the Temple Mount will be the 44th president. And that's the reason for this. So that's the reason why this emergency in New York City was on this date. And it is 4 times 40 days to the prophetic explosion sign on March 16th. And again, March 16th was 4 plus 4 plus 4 days before the explosion sign on March 28th, which was in turn, or is in turn, exactly 4 times 4 days to the date it is predicted that there will be a dirty bomb explosion in New York City. But this date, October 7th, 2022, the day of the declaration of the state of emergency in New York City, is 188 days to the predicted date that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. That is one of the eye-popping confirmations, evidences, forms of evidence from God through his signs that the dirty bomb will explode, engendering a state of emergency in New York City 188 days after the state of emergency was declared in New York City. And again, the number 188 is the word for woe, exclamation mark. All right, so a minute ago, I mentioned how the trail of signs is going through the date March 28th. Again, March 28th was 4 plus 4 plus 4 days after the explosion sign on March 16th. March 28th was predicted in advance, and we received the expected prophetic explosion sign. That was the day that the National Transportation Board announced officially the cause of the explosion at the chocolate factory in Pennsylvania. Now, that's astounding. And I made a video regarding how God has used the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You need to watch that video. It's one of the most amazing videos on the channel. And it also, God has used it to predict a few things, including the prediction for the dirty bomb explosion in New York City. You'll see. It's amazing. Now, the thing is what I didn't mention there, because there's so much information, I can't remember it all the time. But I should have, because this is huge. That explosion, the chocolate factory, was in Pennsylvania. And it was exactly 44 years after the 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster in Pennsylvania. In fact, they're very close to each other. They're like 50 miles apart, the two locations. They're also, by the way, on that note, close to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the capital of Pennsylvania. And there was a prophetic sign in Harrisburg, the debate that Jeopardy host Alex Trebek hosted between the two gubernatorial candidates in 2018. And that's another story explained in the must-watch Jeopardy prophecy video. But Harrisburg hints at Kamala Harris, because through her death in a plane crash will be how the Antichrist will rise to power through her replacement. Her plane crash, by the way, is predicted to be on June 30th, 2023. Now, the thing is that this March 28th date and this sign involving the explosion in Pennsylvania was, as I mentioned, 4 plus 4 plus 4 days after the other explosion sign, and 4 times 4 days to the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. And so, from the 3 Mile Island event, which was a nuclear disaster in Pennsylvania, it is 44 years exactly to the Pennsylvania explosion sign. And then from that, it is 4 times 4 days, which hints at 44, to the date it is predicted that there will be a dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. And a dirty bomb is a conventional bomb made of nuclear material. And so that's astounding. And I'm really sorry I forgot to mention that in the Willy Wonka video. Okay, so the 3 Mile Island explosion event happened at 4 a.m. That's when it began. 4 a.m. and it connects with 44 years exactly, and then 4 times 4 days exactly to the date it is predicted for the dirty bomb explosion. If you're not familiar with the 3 Mile Island accident, the accident released radioactive gases and radioactive iodine into the environment. That's what's predicted to be the disaster in Manhattan. The disaster won't be so much the bomb, but the dirty material, the radioactive material that will be released, causing a mass evacuation of Manhattan Island, just like there was an evacuation at 3 Mile Island. And that is the point. It's absolutely astounding. So the 3 Mile Island is hinting at, and the evacuation is hinting at the evacuation of Manhattan Island due to radioactive nuclear material. What's also interesting here too is that the 3 Mile Island event was also exactly 42 years, and in the Bible, 42 months is symbolism for the period of the Antichrist, which is why God uses 42 years connections. It's exactly 42 years from the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident to the church bombing in Indonesia prophetic sign, another prophetic explosion sign that was predicted in advance. It's amazing. This was predicted in advance, March 28th, 2021. That's, as I mentioned here in this email, it was part of a trail of signs that is leading to the bomb explosion. Another thing too is that explosion, the church bombing, by the way, it was a judgment warning for the church. Indonesia, the 44th president grew up in Indonesia for 4 years. That's the relevancy of that. But that explosion was also 44 years after the deadliest plane crash in history on the Canary Islands. Canary is a type of bird, and the 44th president will become the president again and the Antichrist after Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash that will be caused due to a bird strike on June 30th, 2023. And that's obviously pointing to how the 44th president will become president through the explosion of the engine of Kamala Harris's airplane after a bird strike. Now, there were other signs on 3/28 that confirmed this National Transportation Safety Board announcement regarding the cause of the explosion in the chocolate factory. And this is, again, all explained in the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory video on this channel. But there were other signs on March 28th as well that tie to this. One of them being the barges, 10 of them that broke free on the Ohio River that crashed into, 3 of them crashed into the dam, the McAlpine Dam, which hints at a high place, which hints at Bama. One of them got submerged, and that was the one, happened to be the one that was carrying 14,000 gallons of methanol, a highly explosive liquid. And that's the point, is that this was the same day as the explosion sign in Pennsylvania at the chocolate factory sign, and we are talking about a dirty bomb, dirty material, toxic material. That's what the methanol here hints at. It also hints at explosive. It also hints at contamination because it's the Ohio River, which people get water from, drinking water even. And that's one of a number of water contamination signs and explosion signs, including the East Palestine sign, which I won't talk about in this video, but arguably is the most important sign of all. In a way, it's amazing anyway, and I'll be explaining that in another video and how it ties and points to the dirty bomb explosion. It's huge. But anyway, so you get the point, and the Ohio River also hints at that because it was East Palestine, Ohio. But anyway, this was on the same day. It was in Louisville, Kentucky, the capital of Kentucky, Louisville. That's where the dam was and where the barge was. And we had 2 other Kentucky signs on that same day to confirm this. And that's how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second, third, and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs on the internet. So the second and third witness here to the Kentucky Dam sign also were two other Kentucky signs on the same day. The other one being that the legislature in Louisville, the capital of Kentucky, where the dam was, where the barge was, by the way, the dam is symbolism for judgment because of Noah's flood, and the dam bursting, the waters bursting forth from the deep is dam symbolism. So the other sign in Kentucky that day was the legislature there that passed the bill that made Kentucky gun rights sanctuary. It was Bill 153, which is a second witness to it being prophetic, because 153 is extremely prophetic and is one of three unusually specific numbers in the Bible. The 153 fish in Jesus' last miracle of fish being caught in the boat, which is symbolism for the end of the age of fishing for men. It's end time symbolism. 153 is 9 times 17. The Antichrist was president from 2009 until 2017. And 153 fish in the Bible were caught in the boat. And on this day of Bill 153, we have this boat sign in the same city. And this Antichrist will attempt to take away people's guns. That's the big thing that the left wants to do, because that's what's in their way between them and totalitarianism. It's all of the guns. It's always been the guns. The only thing that's ever stopped communism from taking over the entire world is Americans and their gun ownership. There would be no point for Russia or China to invade America, for example, because there would be no way to take it over. They have too many guns. And the federal government likewise needs to take away the guns for them to bring in their totalitarian hysteria and evil political cult. And so that's why it's all about the guns. And Satan knows this too, and that's why all of the mass shootings by people that are demon-possessed. Okay, so, and also, this, however it's going to happen, I'm not sure. But what I know is that God is pointing through his prophetic signs, including this example right here, that whatever is going to happen with this dirty bomb, it will lead to further increased persecution of conservative Christians, and which will lead to them being labeled as domestic terrorists and leading to the taking away of their guns. Somehow, that's what the dirty bomb is leading to. Okay, I don't quite understand it, but what I know is that God is communicating this through his signs, and this is an example. The fact that this Kentucky sign was passed right when the dam hit Kentucky, right there on the same day as what was expected, with this in advance of this date, 3/28, with the dirty bomb explosion sign expected on the date. Okay, so that's why it passed in Kentucky, being a gun sanctuary. The bill, by the way, is all about resistance to the federal government and any future attempt from the federal government to take away guns of people in Kentucky. That's what that bill is all about. It's huge. It's monumental in prophetic significance. It's what I'm trying to communicate is that the Second Amendment is huge. It's the only thing that's standing in their way. And furthermore, the explosion in Pennsylvania at the chocolate factory was in the second state. And it was on 2nd Avenue, which is confirmation that this is pointing to the Second Amendment, because the two tie together again, as I explained. The barge and the explosion in Pennsylvania tie together. Okay, and also the National Transportation Safety Board is federal government symbolism. And that's what was the sign on March 28th. It was their announcement as to the cause of the explosion, which was a gas pipe leak. And as explained in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory signs, that ties into the gas pipe and evacuation when the bridge collapsed in Pittsburgh at the time that Joe Biden was in Pittsburgh, coincidentally, to deliver a speech regarding infrastructure. And it collapsed the 16-inch gas pipeline, which caused the evacuation in the neighborhood. And that was exactly 160 days to the massive oil pipeline explosion at Harris County, as in Kamala Harris, and on and on. But that's already explained. The point being is that Joe Biden, national symbolism, and National Transportation Safety Board symbolism, this ties back into the issue of gun rights, okay? And so if you're a liberal and you don't understand why people make a big deal about guns and you want to take away people's guns, please know that you are working for Satan. You're not educated, and that's why you're a liberal, no offense. But you need to learn more and not just take whatever is being told to you at face value on the mainstream media and from the left. You need to understand all sides. Even any conservative, they need to know what the left thinks. But that's unavoidable for a conservative because they're living in the liberal dominant culture in which the media is all liberal, right? So it's the purview of a liberal to also get the other side of issues, which they never do. They're completely ignorant. They don't even understand why the Second Amendment is important. Okay, so because it's the only thing that's stopping them, the communist takeover, which is what we're having. It's a Marxist coup that's underway as we speak. It's war. All right. Now, the other sign that occurred in Kentucky on the same day was the stabbing of the senator from Kentucky's assistant, the staff assistant for Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, was stabbed in Washington, D.C., which gives this more Washington Capitol symbolism, which is further confirmation of what I am saying, the significance of this bill in Kentucky on this day. And also, God is pointing to, through his prophetic signs, an assassination of a political figure or an attempted assassination. And, well, this is another story. Well, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to add any more right here. But that's what's going on here too. And that will obviously involve guns. And that could be the trigger that will lead to the confiscation of guns. Some political figure, perhaps even Barack Obama. I'm not sure. It could be Barack Obama. There is a passage in Bible prophecy where it says that the Antichrist recovers from a mortal wound to the head. And there was the head wound shooting in the 48th state, and Barack Obama will be the 48th president. I forget her first name, Giffords, the representative from Arizona, the U.S. representative. Anyway, that's another subject. But that's all part of the stabbing of this assistant from Kentucky on the day of these other Kentucky signs on March 28th. So as we can see, March 28th was very important, and God was pointing to it ahead of time. And that's why it was predicted ahead of time. And now let's continue on with the story from this March 28th date. So here's one reason, but why, as I wrote, but why would God design 316 to be a step only 12 days prior to the explosion on 328? Again, I was predicting ahead of time 328. Well, what's interesting is that 3 times 16 equals 48, and 3 times 28 equals 84. Only March, June, and August can produce 2 dates that hint at 48 and 84. The reason why 3 times 16 equals 48 and 3 times 28 equals 84 is interesting is because the 48th president, Barack Obama, was born on the date 8-4. In fact, I believe this is why he was born on 8-4. One of the reasons was to point to how he will be the 48th president, in order to point to hint at 48. There are other reasons why he was born on 8-4, though. All right. On March 25th, 2014, Barack Obama said the thing that he feared most was a dirty bomb explosion in New York City. This was exactly 9 times 9 months before the bombing in downtown Nashville. Is there a number 9 in or 81 in the Nashville bombing incident? Yes. There were 8 injured and 1 death for a total of 9, which confirms the 9 times 9 months connection. Nashville was the only major city wholly within the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse, which is about the sun, which is 93 million miles away. The Nashville bombing, therefore, also symbolizes the coming explosion of the sun on the surface of the sun that will cause catastrophic blackouts, which is why the Nashville bombing next to Church Street was 93 days before the second wettest 2 days in Nashville history, which pointed to the wettest 2 days in Nashville history, which was another prophetic sign, and flooding in Nashville on 3/27 and 3/28, the day of the church bombing in Indonesia. By the way, the church bombing in Indonesia is very prophetic also because it ties into other Indonesia church bombings, which I explained in the Bali bombing video. Okay, for example, there were two suicide bombers in this church bombing, and likewise in 2002, there were two suicide bombers that killed 202 people exactly 22 years before the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on October 12, 2024. Okay, so and this church bombing is in turn exactly 8 plus 8 plus 8 days before March 28th, 2023, and this explosion sign of the announcement by the National Transportation Safety Board of the cause of the explosion at the chocolate factory in Pennsylvania. In other words, God has tied in Barack Obama and his statement regarding a dirty bomb in New York City into this trail of signs. Because again, this sign on March 28, 2023 is 4 times 4 days to the predicted date that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. I hope you followed that. It's 9 times 9 months from his statement, the 44th president's statement, to the Nashville bombing, the downtown Nashville bombing, which affected 9 people, hence the 9 times 9 months. And by the way, the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And then from the Nashville bombing, it is 93 days, which is relevant because Nashville hints at the sun, to the sign that was predicted in advance that occurred in Nashville, which was the wettest 2 days of rain that coincided, and that's explained more in other videos, but coincided with the church bombing sign. And that in turn connects with the explosion at the chocolate factory sign, which connects with 4 times 4 days to the predicted date that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. Downtown Manhattan, downtown Nashville, okay? So, also the Nashville bombing was on Christmas morning, and it connected with the church bombing 93 days later. Another second witness to that connection. It was also one of 4 disasters in Nashville, prophetic disasters in Nashville, to occur within 1 year. That's another subject too, explained in another video. Okay, now this is profound here. I discovered during this time that Obama visited Hiroshima and delivered a speech on March 27th, 2016, exactly 42 months before Pope Francis, the other Antichrist, because in Bible prophecy there are 2 Antichrists. Pope Francis is the first one, from which the second one, Barack Obama, gets his power. This was 42 months exactly before, and 7 times in Bible prophecy it says that a period of 42 months is symbolism for the Antichrist's period. We are already well inside that 42 months, though, and the prediction being made in this video will prove that, and that is the purpose of this prediction from God, is to prove that. Otherwise, there is no purpose for this prediction. It's to prove the things that I'm saying in this video are true. That is why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Anyway, we are already well inside the 42 months, but the point here is that Obama visited Hiroshima exactly 42 months before Pope Francis visited Nagasaki in Japan, and both of them were, of course, delivering anti-nuclear weapons speeches. And of course, 42 months is the symbolic of the Antichrist. Francis was in Japan visiting the hidden Christian monument in Nagasaki exactly 666 days after UNESCO officially declared the hidden Christian sites in Nagasaki to be World Heritage Sites, which was obviously undeniable confirmation that Pope Francis is the Antichrist from whom Christians will be hiding. There's no other way to interpret that, by the way. 666 days between him at the Hidden Christian National Monument from the day they were officially declared UNESCO sites. Christians will be in hiding, not necessarily in a cowardly way, but avoiding the mark of the Antichrist. And these two Antichrists will be leading the United Nations. They will lead the UN and the world in their call for world peace. This call for peace will follow the dirty bomb explosion. And when it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran on May 17th and then nuke Damascus, Syria on May 20th this year, 2023. Also, in Daniel chapter 9, the most central prophecy in the Bible, the Antichrist is described, and it is also clear from that prophecy that it is the Pope. That is the correct interpretation of the preceding verse, 9:26. Verse 27, the last verse, regards the 70th week, the symbolic 70th week of the Antichrist's period. And that's why exactly 70 months back from the day that Pope Francis was in Japan was the day that he, at the Vatican, let two doves out of his window in a ceremony for world peace, and they were immediately attacked and taken down by a seagull and a crow. It was an international news story. And it was very symbolic, of course, that the Antichrist is Pope Francis, who comes in the name of peace. Exactly 2 months after the two doves were attacked by two other birds at the Vatican. And by the way, birds symbolize the Vatican in Revelation chapter 18. The dirty birds are hinting at the Vatican and Roman Catholicism and the cardinals at the Vatican. And Roman Catholicism is filled with bird symbolism. But exactly 2 months after the two doves were attacked by two other birds, unclean birds, if you will, was the day that the two Antichrists met for the first time at the Vatican on March 27th, 2014. One of the two birds that symbolizes the two Antichrists was a white seagull, and the other bird was a black crow, which are also hinting at Barack Obama and Pope Francis. That was exactly 50 years after what is known as the Good Friday earthquake, the strongest ever earthquake in North America that occurred on Good Friday, Easter Friday, in Alaska in 1964, and caused a lot of damage. 50 years is extremely prophetic in the Bible, and the number 50 is symbolism for the church, because Pentecost is symbolism for the church, and the Feast of Pentecost, the name Pentecost, literally means 50th. In the Omer count to the Feast of Pentecost, it is a count of 49 days and 50 days, and that's why this earthquake occurred in the 49th state, 50 exact years before the two Antichrists met. It was the strongest earthquake in North American history, this Good Friday earthquake, which also hints at the church, incidentally. It was 9.2 in magnitude, which probably hints at 9 times 2 equals 18, which hints at 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is the number of the Antichrist. There were 131 deaths and $311 million in damages. And these are two numbers that God uses. God uses combinations of 2 1s and a 3, including such as this, because he is pointing to 2 verses, which is Revelation chapter 3:11, and which is regarding the Church of Philadelphia. And also, speaking of Philadelphia in a second, I'll make that more relevant. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. Jesus wrote this in his letter to the Church of Philadelphia in the book of Revelation. the only church that Jesus said would be spared or raptured from the persecution of the Antichrist. And this is why he points to this particular verse through his prophetic signs. And he uses Philadelphia to contrast with the following church, the seventh of the seven churches, the Church of Philadelphia, which he has clearly demonstrated through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, to be the American Evangelical Church, the church that will be left behind. That's not to say that evangelicals will be the only ones left behind, of course. In that letter to the Church of Laodicea, Jesus said that he reproves whom he loves. And God is very displeased with the American church. And also the 131st word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for blood disease. And you can make your own deduction as to how blood disease is related to the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, blood disease, the thing that people get when they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And exactly 50 months before Pope Francis was in Japan and departed Japan was the day that Pope Francis was in America and departed America on 9/27. Speaking of Daniel 9/27, he departed from America on 9/27, the date September 27th, in 2015, from Philadelphia, which is one of the seven churches and is symbolic of the church. God uses the city of Philadelphia in his prophetic signs to symbolize the church, as does the number 50, because Pentecost, the Feast of Pentecost, symbolizes the church, and Pentecost literally means 50th. And that's why it is exactly 50 months from when the Antichrist departed Philadelphia on 9/27 to the day that Pope Francis, the prophetic day that he was in Japan and departed Japan. Now, the reason for going into all of this regarding the Pope and the 50 months connections and is because we were talking about March 28th. And March 28th is also a church sign because of Bill 153, for example. They're all church signs, arguably, because the judgment that's coming to America isn't coming without it also including judgment for the church. As Peter said, judgment begins with the church. And the church is supposed to be the light to the world, and the reason why the world is as dark as it is because the church, for the most part, doesn't even recognize how dark the times are because, well, God is displeased with the church. So anyway, that's also confirmed through this number 153, because this is the number in Jesus' last miracle that symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men, the fish caught in the net, the harvest of the fish, the church. And for that matter, let's be clear, the purpose of God's creation, the purpose of the universe is his church. That's the purpose of his plan. It is all about the church and those that will be saved. And so anyway, we have this Bill 153 on this day of March 28th in conjunction with these signs that are the explosion sign, the National Transportation Safety Board, official statement about the cause of the explosion in Philadelphia, which was the chocolate factory explosion, which is also, as explained in the chocolate factory video, the Willy Wonka video, is also about the church. It's about those that will make the kingdom. You need to watch that amazing video that I made. And so it's so important. As I explain in that video, I explain how Willy Wonka, the movie, the first one, the classic one, the Johnny Depp one, Tim Burton one is garbage. The classic 1971 movie is actually a gift from God that expresses God's plan and the purpose of life. You need to watch that video, and you need to pass that video on to those that don't know Christ. This will help them understand the God's plan and why it is that things are the way they are. And so I won't go any more deeper than that. So, but anyway, that's the point. It's also a church relevant sign, the chocolate factory explosion in the second state on 2nd Avenue, which ties to the Second Amendment, which was this sign, which was this passing or coming into law of Bill number 153 in the capital of Kentucky on the day that the barges got slammed into the bridge or the dam in Louisville, Kentucky, the capital. And that's the methanol, highly explosive material, and the concern about that. Anyway, all of that, okay, is the reason for going into all of that is because this is date 328 is 50 days, which symbolizes the church. Pentecost symbolizes the church, and Pentecost literally means 50th day. And from these church-related signs, it is exactly 50 days to the day that it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. Nuclear explosions, Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. Okay, so that's why this is all relevant. It's a big picture. It's all tied together. It's an interconnected web. It's really the tallest task to try to separate the web and slice it and give it into chunks to explain, because it's an interconnected web, and it's when you try to explain one part of the web, you pull the entire web. Anyway, so yes, the explosion, the dirty bomb explosion signs are also connected to Israel, of course. Israel is about to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities and then nuke Damascus, Syria. And that'll be in May 17th and May 20th are the predicted dates for that. But May 17th will be exactly 50 days, which is symbolic of the church after these church-related signs, including this Bill 153. And that's why I went into the two antichrists who gave speeches in Japan, which is symbolism for nuclear bombs, and how their connections involve the number 50. All right, now the main reason why all of these church signs on the date 328, or if you will, also more confirmation that these are church signs on the date 328, is that the date 328 hints at Daniel 3, chapter 3, verse 28, which is the verse in this chapter that regards the mark of the Antichrist. This chapter is about Daniel and his fellow servants that were taken from Israel to Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. The king issues a decree that everyone must bow down and worship the statue at the time that the music plays. And Daniel and his fellow servants from Israel, they can't do that because that's tantamount to denying their God. The first commandment is, thou shalt not have other gods before him. God is a jealous God. The thing he hates most is false religious worship. And so doing this act of worshiping the statue at the time that's required and not doing it is being faithful to their God. And because of this, Daniel and his servants, as a punishment, were thrown into the fiery furnace. But when they were thrown into the fiery furnace, nothing happened to them. And it was able to be seen from outside the fiery furnace that nothing was happening to them. The fire was not burning them. And that there was a fourth figure inside the fiery furnace with the three servants of Israel, from Israel, Daniel and his two fellow servants. There was a fourth figure, which is a theophany of Lord Jesus Christ. And so that was who was protecting them in the fiery furnace as they were going through the tribulation for denying what is essentially a metaphor for the mark of the Antichrist that's described in the book of Revelation, which God has overwhelmingly confirmed the precise thing as to what it is. And many people have already taken it. It's the snake bite. I'll leave it to you to figure out what that means. There is a video on this channel, though, titled the Snake Bite Video, which you need to watch. because God has also, for that matter, provided snake symbolism, prophetic signs that identify what the mark of the Antichrist is. And so anyway, the verse is 3:28, which I'll just read. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These were the Babylonian names given to Daniel and his two fellow servants from Israel, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. That's verse 3:28. That's what it's all about. That's what arguably life is about. When we don't worship God, we inevitably worship something, and whatever it is, it's a false idol, a false god. But this all comes together into a climax at the end of the age with the mark of the Antichrist. And that's what this symbolizes. That's why 3:28. That's why, for example, these signs, these church signs on 3:28 in 2023, which again were 8 + 8 + 8 months, which symbolizes Jesus. The Greek letters are numerals also that add up for the name Jesus, add up to 888. It was this 3:28 date in 2023 was exactly 8 + 8 + 8 months after 3:28 in 2021, the day of the church bombing prophetic sign, which I explained earlier. And also, for another example, there was the prophetic 3-28 Super Bowl, in which the coach of one of the teams was named Dan, hinting at Daniel 3:28. This Super Bowl will forever be known as the 3-28 Super Bowl because the Patriots were down at one point 3-28, and then they came back and won, which was a miracle from God. There were many amazing prophetic signs regarding this. And but that's another subject which I've explained in another video titled the 3:28 Super Bowl Prophecy video. But this Super Bowl also involving, by the way, the team nicknamed Dirty Birds, speaking of the Antichrists, and Rome and the Vatican, which is spoken of with the metaphor of unclean birds in Revelation chapter 18. This Super Bowl, this 3-28 Super Bowl, was exactly 6 times 6 times 6 weeks before the date 3-28 and the prophetic church bombing in Indonesia, which is more confirmation that 3:28 and this date 3:28 point to Daniel 3:28, which is the passage that in this chapter that symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist in the end times, described in the book of Revelation, as the number that symbolizes the Antichrist is 666. And again, in turn, the prophetic church bombing in Indonesia is exactly 8 + 8 + 8 months, which hints at Jesus, to these prophetic church signs on 3:28 in 2023, including this Second Amendment gun rights law. This is why we have these prophetic signs, these church signs, and on this date, 3:28 in 2023. All right, now here I get into some really amazing discoveries regarding the history of Rome, ancient Rome, and how it directly relates and was designed by God to parallel the end times period of the Antichrist. Wait till you hear this, okay? So, and this is the bigger reason for why God wanted to point to March 16th and March 28th with these two other explosion signs in the trail of signs leading to the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. As mentioned, 3:16, March 16th, and 3:28, March 28th, give us 48 and 84. I explained that, which hint at Obama. Obama will... and again, 3 times 16 is 48, and 3 times 28 is 84. Obama will end the republic. Let me repeat that. Obama will end the republic and begin a dictatorship and the Antichrist empire Julius Caesar ended the Roman Republic and inaugurated the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar became dictator in 48 BC and was assassinated in 44 BC, which hints at the 44th president and the 48th president, Barack Obama. He was replaced by Augustus Caesar. Obama will be the 48th president. He was the 44th president, and he was born in August on 8/4. And Julius Caesar was replaced by Caesar Augustus, for which the month of August is named after. And Caesar Augustus, by the way, was the emperor at the time of the birth of Jesus. Julius Caesar ruled as consul. He then left Rome when his term ended, and then he returned as dictator after he defeated Pompey in a civil war. Julius Caesar skipped a term. Obama is the leader of the left in a civil war, literally a civil war. He will skip the 45th presidency. He will skip a term. And 45 hints at the number 9, which is the number symbolizing God's judgment. 4 plus 5 equals 9. And 45 is the 9th triangular number. And the reciprocal of 45 is 0.22 into infinity, which hints at the second coming and the Antichrist's defeat, and the second presidency of the Antichrist. So like Julius Caesar, he ruled in a republic, left, and then came back and returned as dictator after skipping a term. Okay, and then in which the 70th Secretary of State was Pompeo. Okay, during the 45th presidency, the prophetic 70th Secretary of State was Mike Pompeo. 70 hints at the 70th week in Daniel chapter 9, the most central prophecy in the Bible, which is a period that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist, or is the period of the Antichrist, this symbolic 70th week. So that's why the 70th Secretary of State was Mike Pompeo. Pompeo, and by the way, Pompeo also, which I don't think I wrote here, hints at the eruption of Vesuvius, which covered Pompeii in ash. It was a destruction in 70 AD, which is why Pompeo was the 70th Secretary of State. Oh, sorry, it was 79 AD. I apologize. It was 9 years, a prophetic 9 years after 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple, and that on the 9th of Av, which further confirms the 9 years connection. But what's described in the book of Revelation is also a parallel with the destruction that occurred of Pompeii and the eruption of the volcano. But that's relevant because there in the book of Revelation, it's talking about the eruption of a volcano, which will be Yellowstone in the 44th state on the 44th latitudinal line, which hints at the 44th president. That's described in Revelation chapter 8 and chapter 9. The destruction of Mystery Babylon, described in Revelation chapter 18, parallels the destruction of Pompeii. There's similarities. It's inspiration, if you will, for the destruction of Mystery Babylon, which is Rome, right near Pompeii. And no, for those people that are interested in Bible prophecy, Mystery Babylon is absolutely not America. It's very clear it's Rome. It's Rome and the Vatican. Where these people get confused, besides overlooking the plethora of verses that are absolutely clear that Mystery Babylon and the headquarters of the Antichrist are Rome, is the passage regarding the merchant ships that are watching the destruction of Rome. But this is, like I'm saying, it's all inspiration. It's clues that we are talking about Rome. It's not New York City. It's just allegory that's transferred over from the time and period of time that it was written, but it's intended to identify Rome. Pompeo's first name is Mike, which is short for Michael. Obama represents or will be the dragon described in Revelation chapter 12, which is thrown down to earth from heaven by Archangel Michael. Well, more precisely, the red dragon that is thrown down is Satan. And Satan's representative, the Antichrist, Barack Obama, is described as being as someone that speaks like a dragon. But also the activities that are alluded to in Revelation chapter 12 that involve the dragon will be carried out by Barack Obama. Mike Pompeo became the Secretary of State 110 days. Joshua died at the age of 110. That's the reason for this. And Joshua, of course, is symbolism for walls of security collapsing in God's judgment, as in America's walls of security, which the 44th president is synonymous with, the southern border wall of security. Trump hints at trumpets that were blown before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho. The Hebrews blew trumpets. And that's why Mike Pence, Trump Pence, hints at trumpets. Anyway, Mike Pompeo became the 70th Secretary of State 110 days after the date 110, which hints at 110, which was the end of the earthquake tetrad, and the walls of security collapsed on Jericho due to an earthquake. And the earthquake tetrad was 4 7.0 or greater earthquakes spaced at 177-day intervals, which is the same as a blood moon tetrad. The 4 blood moons are also spaced at 177-day intervals. And the third of the earthquakes in this earthquake tetrad was the date of it was also extremely prophetic. The 7-point-something earthquake on the day of on July 17th, 717 in 2017, the day that the Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount for the first time due to the terrorism. And that was exactly 49 biblical years, a prophetic year made up of 12 months of 30 days each, exactly after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 1969, which is another story. It's another thing which parallels, incidentally, though, the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, the most central prophecy in the Bible regarding the final period of the end times, and that's what this earthquake tetrad was signifying. And so that was amazing to see that happen. And the end of that earthquake tetrad was on the state, which symbolizes earthquake judgment, the date 110. And that date in turn was another 110 days. So the date 110, which hints at 110, was 110 days after the Revelation chapter 12 sign in the night sky, the sign that's said to be the quote unquote great sign in heaven in Revelation chapter 12, which in Revelation chapter 12 talks about the dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth. That sign was fulfilled in the night sky on September 23rd, 2017. If you're not familiar with that sign, I suggest you do a search on that. It's one of the most important things. This 2,000-year-old prophecy was fulfilled on that day. All right. Now, this connection to Julius Caesar and 48 BC and 44 BC is more confirmation for the dates 316 and 328. 328 is 44 years exactly after the 3 Mile Isle incident at 4 a.m. And it is 4 times 4 days to the prediction. The date is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan on April 13th. Right there. Okay, so in this email, I've predicted that. And this email was sent, as you can see, on February 9th. So at least February 9th is when I knew the prediction on April 13th. Okay, right there. 4 times 4 days before the prediction of the dirty bomb on April 13th. Okay, so there you have it. So again, 316 to 328 is 12 days, which is 4 plus 4 plus 4 days. And then 413 is 4 times 4 days after 328, which is 44 years after the 3 Mile Isle incident. Oh, and 3 Mile Island hints at the third term for the 44th president. So that's why 3 Mile Island which hints at the evacuation of Manhattan Island, the evacuation of 3 Mile Island and the area around it. It connects with 44 years and then 4 times 4 days. And that's why it hints at the third term for the 44th president. It's absolutely astounding, the details that God includes in his signs. All right, these 2 dates, 316 and 328, these 2 explosion signs on these 2 dates, which I've been talking about, are also confirmed through the false missile alert in Hawaii. Because as was mentioned, 316 was exactly 1,888 days from the false missile alert. And that hinted at, again, H188, whoa, exclamation mark. But 328, the other explosion sign, the chocolate factory explosion sign, is exactly 1,900 days after the false missile alert. Okay, the reason why that's relevant is the second plane hit the South Tower 17 minutes after the first one that had a crew of 9, and the second plane had a crew of 9 people. 17 divided by 9 is 1.888, which hints at H188, whoa, exclamation mark. So that's why the second plane that hit the South Tower 17 minutes after the first one had a crew of 9 people. The first plane, by the way, had a crew of 11 people. It was Flight 11 as well. Okay. And also 9 times 17 is prophetic, as 9 times 17 equals 153. And on this 328 date, in 2023, we had the prophetic Bill 153, making Kentucky a gun rights sanctuary. But also it hints at Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017, and who arrived first in Washington, D.C. as the senator from Illinois during the 109th Congress, lived on 109th Street while studying at the University of Columbia, and will return to the District of Columbia as the president and Antichrist due to the shenanigans that brought the president in during the 117th Congress. But anyway, 9/11, the events of 9/11 pointed to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 10 through 11, which is explained in other videos. And 19 hints at 9 plus 10 equals 19. And 9 is symbolism for God's judgment, and 10 is symbolism for God's perfect order, and that's why 19 symbolizes God's perfect judgment. And that's why it's exactly 1,900 days from the false missile alert to this explosion sign on 328. Also, the false missile alert is about an evacuation, and likewise, the events of 9/11 were about an evacuation from Manhattan Island. And exactly 1,900 days after the false missile alert is this sign on 328, which was exactly 44 years after the evacuation of 3 Mile Island, and 4 times 4 days to the evacuation of Manhattan Island. Due to nuclear material, likewise, the 3 Mile Island evacuation was the result of radioactive nuclear material. All right, this is amazing. Returning back to ancient Rome, during a food shortage crisis in Rome in 22 BC, Caesar Augustus was given dictatorial powers over the food supply. The number 22 is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and only those that take the thing will be able to buy food in the coming food shortage crisis. And the reason why the number 2 is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist is because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, described in Ezekiel chapter 9, would have been the Tav mark. And the Tav letter is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet and is the 22nd letter. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, which is the 22nd book out of a total of 22 books that have a total of 22 chapters. And that's why the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized in God's prophetic signs with the number 22. This has been confirmed so many times. It's amazing. And that's why it's astounding that the food supply crisis was in 22 BC and Caesar Augustus was given dictatorial powers over the food supply, which is exactly what is predicted in the book of Revelation with the Antichrist, which includes one of the two Antichrists that was born in August. Incidentally, when I was in Rome handing out my flyers, warning people that the Pope is the Antichrist, and by the way, if you would like the file for the flyer I hand out, which I believe everyone should be doing, no matter what, unless they have a health issue, they should be out on the streets doing something like this every day, including even putting them on car windshields in busy parking lots, mailboxes, or handing them out on busy street corners. If you'd like the file for the flyer I hand out, please email me and I'll forward it to you. You could also, everyone should have them on them as they're going about their day, including when they go to the grocery store, hand them out in the aisles as they go up and down the grocery store or in the bank. And if you are shy, my recommendation for you is to get over it, because courage isn't a lack of fear, it's action in spite of it, and God wants us to be courageous. But anyway, while I was in Rome handing out the flyers, I was looking across the valley from Circus Maximus, and I noticed that there was this big building in the distance, and it had a huge blue, baby blue flag. In fact, it was the UN flag. And I was curious, well, why is the UN in Rome? I didn't know very much. And so I looked it up, and it turns out that the departments that are headquartered in Rome of the UN are the World Food Program and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. Just coincidentally. And coincidentally, Bible prophecy says that Rome is the Mystery Babylon, the headquarters of the Antichrist, and that the Pope is the Antichrist, and that food will be rationed. So that's quite something. Caesar Augustus was born on the date 923. By the way, that's the date of the Revelation chapter 12 sign, which is about the rapture and the escape of God's faithful from the persecution of the Antichrist, who is symbolized by the numbers and the 9 and 23, which are paired together in God's signs to establish that. 23 is the ninth prime number. Both of these numbers from the Bible symbolizes God's judgment. The president, the basketball president that became president in 2009, wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Also, the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by 9 and 23 because, as I said, the inverse of the mark is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, which is symbolism for the mark. And the mark involves 23 sets of chromosomes. That's what the mark affects. And if one doesn't take this mark that will affect their 23 chromosomes, they will not be able to purchase food. And so this is why it is astounding that Caesar Augustus, who was given dictatorial powers over the food supply and is symbolism for the Antichrist, was born on the date 923. Because the date 923 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, which one will need to take if they desire to eat food. But taking the mark of the Antichrist, that will affect one's 23 chromosomes, is tantamount to denying Jesus, which is why the number 23. Because in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus said to Peter that before the rooster crows twice, Peter will deny him 3 times. This rooster crowing twice and Peter's 3 denials hints at 23. Before the rooster crows twice, Peter would deny him 3 times. And taking the mark of the Antichrist is tantamount to denying Jesus. And the purpose of this prediction that is from God in this video is to prove this. This is the purpose for the prediction. Make no mistake. Without this purpose, there is no purpose for this prediction that is from God. The purpose of this prediction is to prove what I am saying to be, if you can read between the lines, is the mark of the Antichrist. For those that can't understand what is the big deal about, and by the way, this mark of the Antichrist does not require some sort of additional technology to go with it. And nor does it require some form of false religious worship, such as a worship of a statue. The worship of the image of the beast is involved with this mark of the Antichrist as it is. Some enforcement technology isn't the mark of the Antichrist. The mark of the Antichrist is the spiritual abomination, which is what this thing is. And if you can't understand how it is a spiritual abomination, let me help you a little bit. For one thing, it uses aborted fetal stem cells, and that's enough. In its development, it uses aborted fetal stem cells. Also, it's deadly. Also, it harms your health. Also, it changes your 23 chromosomes. But also, very importantly, it's not about you. It's not about how it affects you. It's also about how it affects other people. And when you take it, you participate in the system that gives it its power to enforce it on other people. If the 40% of the population that is on the fence and is just spineless, knows they shouldn't do it, but does it anyway for convenience, if they would get off the fence and join the 30% that are fighting back, this nightmare, this totalitarian nightmare would be over. And so anyway, that's the point. That's why it's unrighteous. It's because it gives this system power to enforce it on other people. Okay, so Octavian, the original name for Caesar Augustus, defeated Mark Antony on the 1st of August in 30 BC. This 1st of August hints at Augustus. It's symbolism for the month of August. This was the big defeat. When Caesar Augustus finally defeated the rival, because this was a civil war and he defeated Mark Antony on that day, the victory put him in position to assume complete control over the empire. Through the name Mark, as in Mark Antony, there is also a connection to the mark of the Antichrist. Caesar Augustus gave himself the name Augustus. The etymology of Augustus is derived from the Latin word that means illustrious one. And this hints at the Antichrist, who was born in August, who thinks very highly of himself. April 13th, 2023 was initially discovered to be predicted the date of the dirty bomb through the prophetic sign that was the 1986 Masters Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia, won by the GOAT, greatest of all time, Nicholas, as in Nicholas. GOAT is Antichrist symbolism. Nick, this is one of many men named Nick that God has used to point to the Nicolaitan doctrine, which God has overwhelmingly revealed through his big picture of signs to be specifically the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. The Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is Reformed theology. Sovereign grace and free grace, which come in the packages of dispensationalism and Calvinism, which give us the doctrines of once saved, always saved, the myth of imputed righteousness as evangelicals understand it, the doctrine of our righteousness is as filthy rags, one verse that Luther took out of context and twisted to develop his whole theology. All Christians will be raptured, etc. Anyway, the purpose of the prediction being made in this video, that is from God, is to prove this. This is the purpose for the prediction. You need to watch the arguably most important video on this channel, the 23 church signs video. Anyway, that's why Nicholas is the GOAT here. And this was exactly 444 months before the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. This is also 37 years, and that hints at 3 sets of 7. And the dirty bomb in Manhattan will be the collapse of America's walls of security. And that's what 3 sets of 7 hints at. Again, the story of Joshua. But also, of course, this hints at the 44th president, the GOAT Antichrist, who will persecute God's people that have the Nicolaitan doctrine, that will be left behind because of their Nicolaitan doctrine by the Antichrist that was born in August. All right, let's talk a little bit about this 1989 Masters tournament. By the way, Masters. The name Masters is also a hint at the Antichrist. First of all, it was the 50th Masters tournament. And as I was just saying, this is about Nicholas, which hints at the Nicolaitan doctrine. And what confirms that is that it's the 50th Masters, because the number 50 symbolizes the church. Pentecost symbolizes the church, the Feast of Pentecost, and Pentecost literally means 50. And so that's why this is judgment for the church, the American church, from the Antichrist, who was born in August. And that's why this was Nicholas's record 18th professional major win with a historic one-stroke victory. So 18 hints at the Antichrist, because 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. Also, the 18th prime number is 61, the year the Antichrist was born, in August of 1961. That's amazing. That's also, by the way, given that this is in Augusta, and it was the 18th of his wins, that's amazing. August 1961. Now, he won at the age of 46. Phil Mickelson, that was the second oldest at the time. The record at the time was 48th president, but this was beaten by Phil Mickelson in 2021, and that was a major prophetic sign which was predicted in advance because it connected with the death of Michael Jackson, and that was why it was predicted in advance. And then Mickelson won at the age of 50 on Pentecost, which means 50th day. There's way more to that too, which is explained in other videos, including the Tiger Woods prophecy video, which is a must-watch. Okay. Regarding this, though, Jack Nicklaus's span of Masters victories spans 23 years, which is astounding because that further confirms the Antichrist, who wore jersey number 23, the GOAT and basketball president. Also, he won with a 9 strokes under, 23-year span between his Masters wins. That's a pairing of 9 and 23, which, as I just mentioned, pairings of 9 and 23 confirm the signs and connections and reveal the identity of the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist. Okay. This win won him $144,000. That's amazing, because this number of 144,000 is extremely prophetic in the book of Revelation and is symbolism for God's faithful that will escape the persecution of the Antichrist. Okay, this is amazing. Augustus defeated Mark Antony, as in Mark of the Antichrist, in Egypt. In the Bible, Egypt is symbolism for the world, and Pharaoh of Egypt, the king of Egypt, is symbolism or a type for the Antichrist. The Hebrews are delivered from Egypt, by Moses, which is a type for Jesus, and they are delivered out of slavery. And so, anyway, in Isaiah chapter 31, it begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." And I'll explain. So, God was warning, by the way, in Isaiah chapter 31, that the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites not go down to Egypt for safety from the coming persecution from Babylon. What happened here is that Mark Antony, in the climax to the Civil War, there was a battle in the Aegean Sea, and Mark Antony narrowly escaped through the assistance of Cleopatra and the Egyptian ships, and they went to take cover and seek refuge in Egypt. And then Augustus went down to Egypt to defeat Mark Antony. Now, Kamala Harris's plane will crash near an area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. It will be a going down to Egypt. She will crash in St. Louis, the area code for which is 314. And that's because God is pointing to Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, which is the lion growling and coming down for his prey. And so I'm going off onto a tangent. But the point is that the reason also why she will crash in St. Louis and near Little Egypt is because this is where the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse peaked and crossed over. And the second eclipse that will occur on the date 4/8, as in the 48th president, in 2024, will cross over the path of the first one exactly where it peaked, right over Little Egypt, including Cairo, Illinois. And the X that will be engendered by the two eclipse paths is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, the Tav mark. Okay, and so Augustus went down to Egypt to pursue Mark. Let's see. It also confirms Obama, who was born in August, and he went down to Egypt right after becoming president to deliver his famous Cairo, Egypt speech in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation. He went down to Egypt and defeated Mark Antony in 31 BC, which is complete confirmation that all of this is pointing to Isaiah chapter 31, which begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." This is amazing. It's amazing because it's clear that this ancient Rome history is a parallel with the end times, with eschatology, with the end of the age, the climax of all of history, and the Antichrist. After Mark Antony and Cleopatra were defeated in Greece, Caesar Augustus pursued them down to Egypt, which means that in 31 BC, Augustus went down to Egypt. It didn't have to be like this. Augustus could have defeated Mark Antony anywhere. It didn't have to be in a battle on the Aegean Sea, which then led to them going down to Egypt. And Mark Antony was just barely able to escape with the help of the fleet of the ships of the Queen of Egypt, which is hinting at the King of Egypt, which is Antichrist symbolism in the Bible. And this was designed by God for symbolism, for now, for this video. Because who else, may I ask, is talking about this parallel other than what's being said in this video? This clearly is designed by God for this purpose, and it's only being explained in this video. And when this prediction comes to pass, that's the prediction from God, it will prove that this history is a prophecy that's pointing to our present time. That's the purpose of the prediction. Okay, this was designed by God for symbolism. Caesar Augustus is a type for the Antichrist, as is Pharaoh in Egypt, which is why the battle that led to his becoming the supreme ruler of Rome took place in Egypt, after he pursued Mark Antony down to Egypt. There is also a parallel between the Bible and Mark Antony seeking refuge in Egypt after his defeat in Greece. The Jews sought safety in Egypt, which is what Isaiah is speaking of in chapter 31. As well, Joseph and Mary with baby Jesus sought refuge in Egypt from Herod, another type for the Antichrist. The date 316 hints at 3 times 4 times 4 equals 48. The third term for the 44th president as the 48th president. That's amazing. So this equation here, a big reason for the date 316 is because it hints at exactly this. 316 is 3 times 4 times 4, which equals 48, which hints at the third term for the 44th president, as in the 48th president. All right, now this is after the date 328, and I've come to state that the explosion sign we were expecting occurred. We received the explosion sign that was expected on the date. 316. It is predicted that there will be a dirty bomb explosion on April 13th that will involve Ukraine. I explained this at the beginning of the video. So now we can see this in context of the email thread here. Okay. Again, this was the day of the explosion at the KGB building on the border of Ukraine. And this was predicted in advance. And as I say right here, this was 208 days after the car explosion in Moscow and 28 days before it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan.